Hello, 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 and welcome to another solo edition of This Week in Geek. Birdman has been transferred to the Hamilton special unit to help him with his upcoming surgery for gallbladder and x-rays and all that fun stuff, which he's going through in the next few days. So I'm actually recording this secretly a day and a half early because our regular record time of Sunday will be used so that I can record a last-minute Sunday Funnies with JT, as obviously Birdman can't make his commitment to that. We're shuffling around a little bit what the topic's going to be, in that he's going to pick the topic and go through everything, and I will sort of counterbalance him because obviously I don't have time to prep if I'm doing all the other stuff for the website, and I'll explain at the end of the show what I've been doing in preparation the last few days. So for this particular episode, I have 3 new reviews for you. I have Tropical Heat, Sweating Bullets, which is a classic, in quotes, Canadian television drama released by Mill Creek. We've also got Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town from Xseed Games on the Nintendo Switch. And we have from Mill Creek a Blu-ray double movie feature of My Girl and My Girl 2. Funny story in that one you'll hear actually coming up, because we've got a few news stories, 3 probably centric on video games this week, and then we've got 3 weird stories to go over. But without further ado, let's get into my review of My Girl 1 and 2 from Mill Creek.
This is a fair request, and I promise I will not judge any person only as a teenager, and that this is no more right than saying all teenagers are drunken dope addicts or glue sniffers.
For Mill Creek's recent batch of releases, I received a box with a few of their rewind VHS style Blu-rays of their catalog titles. But one stuck out that wasn't part of that series, but similarly vintage in that it's early 90s, was a set of My Girl and My Girl 2. I had not seen either of these films before, but interestingly enough, I have a quick story to tell about the first film. Now, I'll say this, they're both enjoyable family features. They do hold up quite well. I don't think there's anything too disturbing in them nowadays that a family would have an issue with. They're just good family, coming of age, growing up drama films. Like, it's just overall, super feel good early 90s movies is probably the best way to put it, except, a little thing here or there, which I'll mention. But I'll get the technical details out before I give my quick story. They're both presented in their aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1, so regular widescreen. There's no cropping or anything done here. The second film has a stereo soundtrack, and the first film has a 5.1. They're both lossless. They sound fantastic. They're well mixed. Good Hollywood studio productions. Now, in both films, you have the same director and producers involved, so it's a similar look and feel from each team. There's fine grain kept in the picture. I did a quick comparison to some shots I saw online of some VHS and DVDs, and quite obviously it's a huge visual upgrade, so that in itself is great. But I was surprised that you have, Jamie Lee Curtis in these, and then you've got who else? Dan Aykroyd, and I was surprised because I didn't know that these actors were in it. I did know that Macaulay Culkin was in the first one. And I'm not going to go too much into the plot, but I will tell my quick story here. Growing up as a kid, we all have our weird eccentricities where we're, have an irrational fear of a specific movie or two. Mine was probably pretty standard. I was absolutely terrified of Home Alone, where the furnace growls at Macaulay Culkin, to the point where I couldn't watch it. I have to fast forward or plug my ears when it happened because I was terrified and I thought I was going to pee my pants. I was really little when that came out. So that I guess makes sense. A lot of people would probably agree that that's one of the scary moments as a kid. Another was another Macaulay Culkin movie as well. I was terrified of some scene in Page Master. I can't remember. If I go back and watch it now, I'll probably figure it out. But you discuss with your friends when you get older. You don't want to admit that you're afraid of these things. But I did have a discussion with my best friend growing up in high school about, what was your fear? He said My Girl was the movie that terrified him the most as a kid. He wasn't scared of monsters. He wasn't scared of like demons. He could watch horror films and you wouldn't scare him. I did scare him one time really good by telling him my own alien story that I just made up when we were super tired, and then grabbed onto his arm when it was dark, and he freaked out and basically had a panic attack, which in hindsight I shouldn't have laughed so hard about, but even he laughed about it because he admitted that I got him. But anyway, this movie, My Girl, has a scene in it that traumatized him as a kid. Macaulay Culkin is allergic to bees in it, and there's a scene where he gets swarmed by bees and then eventually dies. So he made it out to sound like it was so bad, and even telling me the story, we're talking almost, 20 years ago he told me the story. Wow, time flies. That he was just, he would even get like flushed and almost hyperventilate thinking about it, that it was so traumatic to him. So I went and purposely wanted to wait and watch the film to get to that point. And I get to it, and it's got the cheesy 90s slow-mo, and Macaulay Culkin just goes, no. And it, not even really acting as good as he usually acts. Even as a kid, he was always a fantastic actor. This just seemed off, like it was ADR dubbed in. And the bees swarm him, and then it slows down and freeze frames, and the next scene is he's dead, and they don't show him. And I went, that's it? That's what gave you nightmares and nightmares? So it's funny what makes, us scared as a kid. So it has a rated PG rating in the States. I think in Canada it's got a G rating. So, again, it's nothing that would really scare you. But if you have a wild imagination or just a strange one, it might be something that you might want to discuss with your kids if you're going to watch it with them, in that it does deal with some death. Now, the My Girl 2 has, obviously, Macaulay Culkin's no longer in it. It has Austin O'Brien, and that's a name you might recognize as the kid from Last Action Hero, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's him. One of my favorite movies of all time, which we've discussed about in our programming before. So that's always a plus to me. They're both on the single disc, and no special features, bare bones. You're looking MSRP $15-$20, depending on if it's States or Canada. You're probably going to find it for $10 on Amazon. It's a good deal for both of them, especially if you have a friend who was traumatized as a kid by the bee killing scene. So give My Girl and My Girl 2 a watch. It's harmless fun, and I can admit, even as a grown man, that they were a good movie to watch in the afternoon when it was raining a little bit earlier this week.
The Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
Gossip, rumors, panic in the streets. We're lucky.
This Week in Geek
News.
And it's news time, and this week we have 3 stories. There was a fair amount, but I think a lot of people already touched upon them on YouTube and other podcasts, and I wanted to pick ones that were maybe more gaming centric, because we won't be doing a prototype episode probably until Birdman gets back from the hospital, unless something major happens, which is very possible. Sony and Microsoft have been making waves with a lot of recent news, but this one's probably going to be Sony centric. So this is from the PlayStation blog. They wanted to introduce Haven, which is a new Montreal-based independent studio. Now, why is Sony announcing this? Well, it's actually headed by Jade Raymond, who you would know from the Google Stadia internal games division that started that big... I guess there were 2 or 3 at one point, but this was the big company that they had formed to develop AAA titles that they were a couple years in development for Stadia, but then they abruptly shut that down a couple months back, and people were wondering what was going to happen. Jade had worked at EA, I think it was Motive, as well as getting her start at Ubisoft, developing the Assassin's Creed games. So this there's a lot of talent here that she brings with her for her team. Well, they're an independent studio, which is kind of surprising because you figure Sony would want to buy them up and make them part of Sony Studios. I think it's sort of going to be contingent on how well this IP does, because they're making a brand new IP for PlayStation that is completely exclusive. We're not talking timed exclusive. Sony appears to be bankrolling a game. So you've got 25 years of experience, and you've got at least a gaming company providing the checks in the wallet that knows how to actually develop games and how to produce games and get them made. So are we a few years away from seeing this title? It's going to depend on a few factors. One of them being, is this a AAA, like we're talking hugely extensive 70-hour plus game? Are we looking at maybe a 10-hour game? Like, it might be smart to go the route of the 7 to 10-hour game and make it price point at the $50 price point instead of the $70 or $80. It could also depend on, are they allowed to use assets? Like, what if, in my mind, I'm thinking this, what if they were, when they were dissolved at Stadia, that they were allowed to take the concepts? It's probably not, but we don't know what happened behind closed doors. Is it possible that they got to take the assets that they were using to develop that game they had been working on for a couple of years and just move the project over to Sony? You know, if Google really wanted to wash their hands of it and they said, all right, we're dissolving the team, and Sony contacts them and says, hey, we want to buy the IP since you're obviously not going to do anything with it because you've shuttered your studio entirely. You can recoup some of the lost development cost if we just buy your IP. It's possible that that's happened. If that's the case, we might be only about a year and a half away from a game, if it was already 2 years into its development cycle. If that's the case, sweet. If not, we might be looking at something that we don't see for the next 3 years. So it's going to be interesting. Regardless, it's nice to see a new indie studio, but an indie studio chock full of veteran developers that know what they're doing. So that's something to keep an eye out for. It's interesting that because they were a new studio that didn't really have a lot of pull, except for Jade Raymond's name, that it was Sony that announced it, even though it's an independent studio. Kind of cool. Moving on to our next story, this is from Destructoid. So PlayStation is giving out 10 PS4 games for play at home in 2021. We did discuss how they gave out Ratchet & Clank, and that this is different. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is different than when people are getting PlayStation Plus games, because when you get PlayStation Plus games for free, as soon as you stop being a PS Plus subscriber, it expires and you have to resubscribe or you can't play those games. These are given away to anybody with a PlayStation account. You don't even have to have the console. You just have to have sign up on their website for a PlayStation account, and you can activate it. And then as soon as you get a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 5, the games are activated and you can use them forever. There's no time limit. They are yours. They just handed you a free game. No subscription service, no Stadia, no Game Pass. It is simply yours. And a lot of them are single player. There's no need to connect online. There's no DRM. It's your game. They did that back in the day. You got to pick a couple different games when they had that big hack on the PlayStation 3. I think we ended up with like Prototype or something and something else. Maybe God of War. I can't remember 100%. It was like 2 or 3 titles. And they did that when the PlayStation 4 first launched. You got 2 free games. I think it was Resogun and... Oh, was it Resogun? And there was the one with... was called Contrast, maybe? And they were free. You didn't have to have an account. It was just free. Like, or didn't have to have like a paid online account. It was just, you got the console, you got it for free. Similar to how you just automatically have a copy of Astro's Playroom. So it's like that. So now that's out of the way. Here are the games you're getting. They're releasing from March 25th to April 22nd. You can activate these titles and make sure you do so, even if you don't have a console. And if you don't have VR, activate it anyway, because I'll get into that a little bit later. But Abzu, which is, I believe, is that not the underwater game? I've had my eye on it, but never went around it. Enter the Gungeon. Res Infinite, which has VR optional support. That's worth it. Res. I remember playing Res on the PS2 at my buddy's house. And we obviously didn't, we laughed our heads off when we found out that there was the trans vibrator eventually, but we played Res just for fun. And he had these 2 big honkin' late 70s floor standing, or I guess you could have mounted them on bookshelf speakers. You know, the ones with like 8-inch woofers Now they're much more efficient with floor standing models, but these big honking guys, we sat him down there, hooked up his tube TV to his 27-inch JVC or something TV, tube TV, that sat on the floor or on top of a couple blocks on the floor next to these two speakers, and his parents would be out, and we would crank that shit, and we just be, and it was like the most fun. We played, I'm not even kidding, probably 16 hours straight one time just playing the original Rez game. So Rez Infinite with VR optional support. Subnautica, that one is the underwater one. That's the one I'm thinking of. The Witness, Astrobot Rescue Mission, fantastic choice. I haven't had a chance to play it because I don't have VR. It's a VR only game. But it's everybody says that it was great, and now that everybody's played Astro's Playroom, well, everybody with a PS5, it's a good addition. Moss, which is a VR game. Thumper, which has an optional VR mode. As well as Paper Beast, which is a PSVR title as well. And they're also going to be kicking in a first-party title, Horizon Zero Dawn Complete Edition. It's funny, maybe played an hour of this game. I picked it up when it was on, cheap dirt cheap sale. But they're going to add that from April 19th until May 14th. You can pick it up. And then this is apparently still running until the summertime, I think June something. So I just had this weird feeling they're going to throw in like God of War or something with it, or maybe Last of Us. I don't know. We're not sure yet, but these are a fantastic bunch of indie titles. And then of course you get Horizon Zero Dawn as that's like a $20, $30 game at least with all the DLC, and that'll get you pumped for, I think is it next year's release that we're getting the next Horizon, Horizon Zero Dawn 2, Horizon 2 Dawn. Horizon Too Fast, Too Furious, whatever it's called. And they're also having a extended 90-day trial for Funimation, and if you're a new member, you can binge it from, was it March 25th to April 22nd, you can activate it, which is pretty sweet. I think we have a press account, so we don't really need that, but for anybody that's wondered, I've always thought that they should include Funimation as part of a tier of PlayStation Plus. Maybe they will eventually. Maybe this is a trial run for that. So that's pretty much going to do it. But that's a lot of free games. That's something to compete, obviously, with Game Pass and xCloud and everything. A bunch of good indie titles. You're yours forever. You don't have to subscribe to anything. You just have to sign up with an email address. And, pretty much anybody on a PlayStation now has done that in the last 15 years. So you end up with, it's probably 20, 40, 60... It's probably like $200, $250 worth of games. That's pretty sweet. And our final story here is also from the PlayStation blog. This popped up, and they randomly showed off what the next VR controller is going to look like. So I'm getting this feeling that we're maybe going to see the PSVR 2 or PS5 VR, whatever they want to call it, maybe during E3 time or during the Summer of Gaming, or whenever they do their next big state of play in like probably May or June. Because this is weird, they just dropped this. And they look like the ones my brother has for the Valve Index. A little different, but they're spherical, like a hollowed out ball that you put your hands through. And it has, interestingly enough, all of the haptic feedback, all the adaptive triggers, finger touch detection, a bunch of other advanced features that aren't in pretty much any other VR controllers. And they look pretty sleek. And I was worried they weren't going to fit my hands. But they do appear to be the right size for pretty much anybody to get in there. They haven't shown anything else about the VR, but they're slowly slipping this out. So my thought was, why show this so early? The only thing I could think of is maybe they realized that there were some production shots that had maybe perhaps been compromised from the factory or somebody, and they're like, hey, let's release this now because it's an odd time to be doing it. Now, here are the features officially from the PlayStation blog. Adaptive triggers. Each VR controller, left and right, includes an adaptive trigger button that adds palpable tension when pressed. Similar to what's found in the DualSense controller, if you've played a PS5 game, you'll be familiar with the tension of the in the L2, R2 buttons when you press them. Such as when you're drawing for your bow to fire an arrow. When you take that kind of mechanic and apply it to VR, the experience is amplified to the next level. Obviously, that's PR speak, but yeah, that makes sense. Haptic feedback. The controller will have the haptic feedback optimized for its form factor. So it's not just they're throwing the same rotor motor or whatever in willy-nilly. They have it balanced so that it makes sense for that controller. Finger touch detection. So the controller can detect your fingers without pressing in the areas where you place your thumbs, index, or middle fingers, meaning it can just detect when you're touching it, like a touchscreen would almost do it. This enables you to make more natural gestures with your hands during gameplay. So when you have your fingers down, things like without pressing down on it, you could have your finger there, just releasing your finger could do something. Or sliding your finger down in a certain motion could do something. Now, it says you're tracking. The VR controller is tracked with a new VR headset through a tracking ring across the bottom of the controller. They're not saying anything about the headset, except that there is obviously a new headset. Action buttons and analog sticks. The left controller contains one analog stick, the triangle and square buttons, a grip L1 and trigger L2, and create button. The right controller contains one analog stick. The cross and circle buttons, or as we call it, the X and circle buttons, a grip button R1, a trigger button R2, and the options button. The grip button can be used to pick up in-game objects as one example. So it sounds like that's interesting how they're doing that. Okay. So there's much more to share about this next generation of VR on PS5. On behalf of all of us at Sony Interactive Entertainment, they want to thank us for taking them along with the journey, yada yada. So pretty sweet. It is cool that came out. I am surprised that they're doing this. I mean, I guess build hype by releasing it slowly, but I have a feeling that they didn't want to have like some leaked pictures come out. They wanted to do it officially. I might be wrong, but whatever. So that's gonna do it for the news. It was all PlayStation centric right now, because I think Xbox has been in the news a lot with their big Bethesda showcase. I'll talk briefly now about the Square Enix showcase that happened earlier this week. Tomb Raider, I don't really care. I own the first two titles in the new trilogy. One came with my one came with my Xbox when I bought an Xbox One, or like a regular Xbox One, and then one came with my Xbox either One X or One S, and I just couldn't get into them. They're not, as far as I can tell, upping it to 60 FPS. If they did that, that would make it worth it, because I know there were frame rate issues previously, and I own two of them already, so there's no point in me getting the trilogy, but for those that haven't tried it, it's probably worth it. Off the top of my head, other things they showed, Just Cause Mobile, don't care, honestly don't. I'd rather have a better Just Cause game on regular console, or give me a firmware update or an update for the game to make it run at 60 FPS for the previous titles. That'd be sweet, but they didn't say anything about that. The two big takeaways were Life is Strange has Life is Strange True Colors, which looks fantastic. They've obviously got a new graphical engine for next gen ready. It's going to load a lot faster. It seems to be dealing with somebody that can feel people's emotions and then have it affect them, which is interesting. There's always some supernatural edge to those stories. I really have to go back and play Before the Storm. I have to play Life is Strange 2. I still have to play Twin Mirror, and I have to play Tell Me Why, because I just got so caught up with other games. But I absolutely love Life is Strange, the first one. That was one of the best games I've ever played. It really changed my perspective on indie titles. And they announced at the end of that there is going to be a remastered version of Life is Strange 1 and Before the Storm. Too bad they're not including Life is Strange 2, but regardless. And it's going to be released either as a separate title later eventually, but it'll be included with the digital deluxe higher end edition of Life is Strange True Colors when it launches in the fall. So I'm happy to see that the graphics look astonishingly better. Like, we're not going to ever see like AAA title on these, but we're talking going from like PS3 indie title to PS5 medium budget looking title. Pretty darn good. And what I'm hoping is that if I get it, I can use my save file again, and then maybe replay certain elements, or then import it and maybe get something bonus. I'm not sure. We'll find out as it comes out. And the final thing was that Project Athia. That was the title that was based on the tech demo they had done of, I think it was The Witch or something. They gave it a weird name back in the day, from Square Enix. That was from, I think it was Luminous Productions. we only saw the teaser a year ago, or just under a year ago. It was like, what was May or June when they showed it off? Well, it's got a new title. It's not going to be called just Athia. So it's called Forspoken. Not Forsaken, not Foreseen, Forspoken, which is going to be a little weird tongue twister to get used to. And they have now cast a new lead to play the character, and they've even modeled the character, completely changed it to look like the real life actress, which is pretty sweet. It looks like action adventure, like Infamous meets Final Fantasy style of gameplay, at least from what I can tell, with a bit of an open world. Looks fun. The frame rate also looks to be 60. And they said that they're, I think, targeting a January 2022 release. So if we're basing it on that, my speculation would be this summer we get Final Fantasy 7, what was it, Intergrade, the PS5 version. Then I thought that maybe we would get Final Fantasy 16 later in the year because they were apparently so far along in development. That's a possibility, but if not, what I could see happening is we get this in the summer, and if we don't get it for Christmas, then they'll probably push Final Fantasy 16 to next summer. And we'll get this in January. And then I'm not 100% sure what Square will have in the fall, which is why I'm thinking, like, if they're releasing Final Fantasy in the summer, I still think we might get Final Fantasy 16 this year, or something else that we're, not expecting. But yeah, so that's Forspoken. It's got a real title. Now maybe Project, was it Triangle Strategy will get a real title. It doesn't sound dumb. But it was a pretty exciting week if you were a PlayStation fan. And that's going to do it for the news. We're going to take a quick break here so that I can bring you my review of Tropical Heat Sweating Bullets, and then we'll be back with the weird news.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Hold that thought. It's crapper time.
Let me take you a little bit down memory lane to the early 90s when most Canadian television was downright terrible. Very few programs out there provided anything that was close to the quality that you would get from an American production. There were some, notable, I would say, bright spots, like Degrassi at the time, but the production budgets were always pretty low. But that led to a lot of shows being produced or co-produced with other countries, especially when Canada became a co-production haven with a lot of tax credits, whereas if you used a lot of Canadian actors, or if you happen to have production facilities up here to do post-production, you could, or film here, a lot of times in BC you could get a discount, but a lot of times these international co-productions would be shot overseas, and with everything like the actors and editing all being done here for domestic television, and then usually sold to the States for some random cable channel. A lot of the USA and TNT channels used Canadian programming. With me going off this hullabaloo, the show I'm here to talk about is Tropical Heat. If you're American and you're, let me think, 35 or older, you might remember a time slot, I believe it was Fridays or Saturday nights on CBS, Crime Time After Prime Time. Now, that was where they took a bunch of Canadian shows that aired here in regular prime time, that were dramas. They aired them as original productions, as if they were American, in this time slot of like 11 p.m., I think it was like 11 or 11:30 to 12:30. Sometimes they were a little longer time slots. And it was supposed to fill the gap, I guess, of when there was late night programming Monday to Friday with talk shows. Well, then Saturday they had this. So you were generally targeting an older demographic, adults that weren't necessarily out on a date, or people that like to stay home and watch TV. And they were almost all crime shows. Night Heat and a couple other shows come to mind. I think the most successful of that group was probably Forever Night, the vampire detective TV show that ran 3 seasons and had a moderate audience as far as popularity goes. Probably the second most popular was here, this Tropical Heat show. In the States, it was known as Sweating Bullets. I remember seeing this. I would have been probably about 5 or 6 years old when it first started airing. And I remember seeing it when I was 7 to like 10 years old. The last season was on and there were reruns endlessly. And it would sort of air, if you were up late at night or even sometimes weirdly in the afternoon on a channel because we didn't have as much programming and they had to fill the CanCon rights. Everything had to be at least 30% programming Canadian on every channel. You would get the show. It was from that era of everybody having a detective show, private investigator show, everybody trying to replicate the wild success that the Rockford Files and Magnum P.I. ushered in the 70s and 80s. There were other shows before that, like Mannix and everything, but as far as this cool, in quotes, somewhat sexy lead and with a woman co-host, or co-star, getting into random, sort of whodunit mystery murders. This was at the tail end of when that became popular, before phasing out in the late 90s for the action-adventure fantasy shows like Xena and everything. Well, this ran for 3 seasons. They were 50-minute episodes, so a little longer than American standard ones because up here in Canada we had less commercials on TV at the time. It also allowed it to... They could insert more commercials and spread it over maybe an hour and a half time slot if they needed to. But the show starred a somewhat semi-popular Canadian character actor. He's made a name for himself most recently playing in TV shows like recurring role in... Oh, why am I drawing a blank on the show now? It was a show on space and sci-fi, bounty hunter space show. Drawing a blank, but yeah, Rob Stewart. He's been in a lot of different sci-fi shows, tons on the Sci-Fi Channel. Local Scarborough, Toronto actor, was sort of billed as like the Canadian Steven Seagal in this. Had the ponytail going when that was a popular thing, and sort of smarmy, almost like a crossover between Magnum P.I., BL Striker, which, by the way, that's a show that we should get on DVD again since it's out of print, and the Steven Seagal type movies of the time. And he ran a investigation company playing the character of Nick Slaughter in Key Maria, Florida. In actuality, the first season was filmed in Mexico as a co-production, the second season in Israel, and the third season in South Africa, all pretending to be the same place. So occasionally you can see things in the background, like planes that don't have Israeli language on them, and random South African writings, or in Mexico. It's supposed to be Florida, but it's clearly not. That was a staple of that. There's a lot of character actors that are Canadian that showed up in here. Ian Tracy probably being the co-star that you've seen the most. He had a major recurring role on Sanctuary, and he's perpetually one of those, oh yeah, that guy, in every single co-production that you see with the Sci-Fi Channel and space. He pretty much pops up at least once or twice in every single one of them. This is a very early role for him. So it followed a weird production schedule. You've got 9 episodes for season 1, then 21 episodes for season 2, and then 36 episodes for season 3. Bringing the total up to what you would have for a standard length, 22-ish episode seasons for syndication. Now, these are the Canadian versions because they have the original Tropical Heat logo at the beginning. They're uncut. They are from what I assume and appear to be broadcast master tapes. Now, they're not from the original film stock or from the original archival copy. They're what you would have seen probably as a duplicate at a major CBS broadcasting house, or from wherever it would have aired up here, where it aired, I think, probably in syndication or on Global or something like that. So they are not going to be the same quality that you get if you had something that was taken straight from the 35 millimeter film or from the actual mastered tapes. It's still better than if you had somebody tape it off of TV and put it up there, or a VHS tape. It's just watching on like a 65-inch TV like mine blown up, you're going to see some imperfections. You're not going to see as much detail in the faces. There's some color correction that could be done. It's just amazing that this show has even been released. I had seasons 1 to 3 from Tango Entertainment put the DVDs out probably about 12 years ago now. And those were marred with major issues of mastering errors. Sometimes episodes would skip or not play. They appear to be of roughly the same video quality for most of the episodes. I did some comparisons to the season 2 that I have, because that's where they crammed a lot of episodes on that set previously, and this Mill Creek release. The Mill Creek release, though, is actually spread out over more discs. So there's a couple instances where there's less episodes per disc that give you slightly, I would say, 10%, maybe 20% better visual quality between them. This also includes the movie, which was actually a compilation of a two-parter and then I think another two-parter that they sort of spliced to make one new story out of. And that was Crisscross from the Files of Tropical Heat. I think that was released several years later, late 90s, as a TV movie when they needed to have a new one done. After watching it, I can't tell if they filmed anything new or if it used existing footage completely. But it is kind of neat to include here because Tango Entertainment at the time had released that separately, and it was super duper out of print. So they include that here. So you get in the previous set from Tango, back in the day, it was a 9-disc set including all 3 seasons, and then a 10th disc if you wanted to buy the movie. This is over 11 discs, so you get a little bit higher quality. It is in the Mill Creek box set that I don't care for, which is the cardboard box with the paper slips inside of it that are cardboard slips, 2 discs per slip. I'm not a huge fan of that. It doesn't scratch them up too badly, but I don't like the way the cases close in here. They have a top that's supposed to clasp in place, but they never stay closed, and you almost have to apply a little piece of tape to keep it closed on your shelf. Not a fan of that. I've mentioned that multiple times. It's probably my only real complaint with this, as they haven't done anything to degrade the video quality from anything that has released previously. It's now easy to get them all in one set. It takes up a lot less space on the shelf. As far as the quality of the episodes go, you have to be somebody that loves the campy late 80s, early 90s stuff. This isn't, your modern action show. This has some hilarious fight scenes. And I mean, like, where you're seeing they're missing each other and they're hitting the ground. If you like Walker, Texas Ranger, this was like Walker, Texas Ranger meets Magnum P.I., but Kmart edition, or Zeller's edition since it's Canadian. The acting is still pretty good. It holds up. It's the way it's shot. Some of the music is just fantastically cheesy. It's just a fun romp. You also get a digital copy to redeem with this. Full disclosure, the edition I got was from the initial print run of press releases, and they did not have the code in the box, and it was actually emailed to me after the fact, but they should have, when you purchase it at retail, a digital code within the box. And if there isn't, you should probably just contact Mill Creek, and they'll send you a code if you can show proof of purchase. And once activated, interestingly enough, I found the digital copy that they have to be about the same quality, maybe even slightly higher, as it wasn't interlaced, because when you get DVDs, they're always 480i, whereas it's 480p or greater when you get streaming. So this is one of those instances that, the streaming copy is just as good, so you may want to check that out too. I can't say enough good things about how much I like this show. It's one of the shows that I used to love watching as a kid that a lot of people don't remember, even my friends. It turns out it was not super duper popular, especially with people my age, but it became a big hit over in Europe. In around 2006 to 2010 or so, it became a huge hit because, remember, everything that's popular here didn't hit Eastern Europe till about 10 years later. So I think it was Serbia where it was like the number one show, like 10, 15 years after it came out. There was even a movie produced about it in the last couple of years. I think it was Nick Slaughter for President, where they ended up interviewing and flying out Rob Stewart to discuss his popularity in Eastern Europe. He became like a symbol for the people there. Super interesting stuff. Not included with the set, but great supplemental watching, as it's a fascinating look at how TV distribution works worldwide, and how sometimes something that was a moderate success in its home country can become an immensely cultural big phenomenon in another country halfway around the world 15 years later. It's worth picking up at its price point. It's going to vary depending because it's Mill Creek, but I imagine you can check it out on Amazon or Walmart. And if you're a fan of any of the shows I mentioned earlier, it's well worth the price.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Time for the weird news. So, Birdman picked these. I think he picked all of them this week. So let us see what he's got for us. So our first story is from The Smoking Gun. I don't think this is a joke site. I think it's real. If not, you can blame him. He picked all the stories. Now this is, like I said, from The Smoking Gun. Pickle packing perv popped on private premise. Oh, he did this to make me choke up. Pickle packing perv popped on private premise. Pickle packing perv popped on private premise. Oh boy. Okay, so Florida man, of course, age 47, arrested for public pleasure session. Oh boy. So it says here, this is from March 15th. A pantless Florida man was arrested yesterday after police spotted him pleasuring himself with a pickle while on a private premise. According to the arrest affidavit, responding to a suspicious person call around 4 p.m., a cop saw Eric DeTige, 47 years old, lying on his back in front of a townhouse in Oldsmar, a city in the Tampa Bay area. DeTige, unencumbered by pants or underwear, had his penis in one hand and a large uneaten pickle in his other hand. He was using the pickle to penetrate his rectum while he was masturbating. Michael, what did you grab the story for? You dirty, dirty man. Seen above, there's a picture of him. It says here, DeTige, whose address is listed as the Flying Cloud Mobile Home Park in Tampa, has prior convictions for theft, disorderly conduct, resisting police, and criminal mischief. Jail records note that he has only God can judge me tattooed on his arm. There is no indication in the court records that the pickle was seized as evidence. Okay. I mean, do what you want to do, but in your own home or in your backyard where it's fenced, maybe not on your front lawn where everybody can see in your townhouse complex or trailer park or whatever it is. Maybe not a good idea. All I could think of is the Pickle Man. It's like, what is it from Rick and Morty? Selenia, the Pickle Man. Our next story here. This is going to be a short news cycle, I think. This is from timesnews.net. Chicken yoga, where the chickens wear diapers. Okay. So again, Tampa, Florida, of course. For decades, the city of Tampa has officially considered Ybor, I think it's Ybor City, to be a bird sanctuary because of its history of chickens clucking around the brick streets. And Ybor is unofficially considered one of Tampa's more eccentric communities. Wait, Florida, Tampa has a more eccentric community? Okay. So, of course, Ybor now offers chicken yoga, a unique take on the animal yoga craze that has predominantly centered around goats, but has included creatures such as dogs, cats, and even sloths. Sloth yoga. That's what I do. I just move and hope I don't die very slowly. It says here, I'm not going to die. I was nervous, said Mackenzie Fox, director of lifestyle at Ybor Hotel Haya, where the inaugural event was held and hosted by Union 3 Studio. But it went really well. It was a unique experience that perfectly embodies Ybor. The combination of animal therapy and yoga is said to be relaxing. I don't know about chickens, though. During the more mainstream goat yoga, the creatures walk on attendees' backs and allow cuddles. The chickens did neither, Fox said, but were friendly. Frankenstein was definitely making some fun noises, which was really fun when it was supposed to be a zen moment. They didn't go on top of people, but were chilling and walking around the people. They were definitely a lot more social than I thought they were going to be. The participating birds are domesticated, in quotes. Fox said, they live in the backyard of Ybor Misfits micro sanctuary that cares for domesticated chickens abandoned in Ybor. The chickens and roosters were bathed before the event and diapered to prevent a mess. We get the diapers from Etsy, and they wrap over all the wings and under the legs for a perfect fit. Said Dylan Brees, who runs the sanctuary where Ybor Chicken Society seeks to bring unity between the fowl and Ybor residents and businesses. Once snapped over the back, they are ready for some crescent lunges and warrior poses. Chickens date to Ybor's inception in the 1800s as a community built by immigrants primarily from Cuba, Spain, and Italy. Residents throughout Ybor kept the birds for food. The East Ybor neighborhood boasted farms. Some believe that the descendants of the original chickens walked the streets. That's your story. Cephas Gilbert, I'm assuming it's Cephas. It's Cephas. So Cephas Gilbert, who runs the juice bar on 7th Avenue, claims today's red-feathered chickens are related to birds he once kept in a coop on 4th Avenue. He says a storm in the 1980s destroyed his coop, allowing 40 birds to roam free and birth future generations. Brees said chickens are also abandoned in Ybor by those who tire of caring for the birds at their homes. The chickens have been a source of controversy over the years. Opponents wanted to trap and remove them for population control. Others want to physically shoo them away from private property. Neither is allowed. A 1989 ordinance declaring all of Tampa a bird sanctuary protects the birds from being trapped or bothered. I've seen cat yoga, goat yoga, and I've seen dog yoga, Fox said. Chickens are such an integral part of Ybor. Why not chicken yoga? Maybe because they can be violent, give you diseases, and hurt you? And they can claw you up pretty good? That might be a good idea. All the other ones are mammals, you mentioned. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Our final story here is from ndtv.com. Angry customer demands refund after ordering a dozen masks, receiving, in quotes, only 12. Hello, I ordered a dozen custom masks from you, however you only sent me 12, the customer wrote. The customer is always right, or so goes the popular saying. But what is a business owner supposed to do when the customer is, very obviously, in the wrong? One small business owner from Minnesota has earned the internet's admiration for keeping her calm while dealing with an angry customer who demanded a refund after ordering a dozen face masks and receiving only 12. According to the news website CRFO, Zeta McCrae is a single mother and owner of Zeta's Vault, an online shop that sells shirts, hoodies, cards, and customized face masks. Ms. McCrae's small business recently vaulted to viral internet fame after her exchange with the customer was shared on Twitter. Ms. McCrae says her heart dropped when she received an email with the subject line reading, "Wrong mask order," reports the Mirror. According to screenshots of the email exchanged on Twitter, the unnamed customer wrote, "Hello, I ordered a dozen custom masks from you. However, you only sent me 12. I really needed them all. I would like a refund, please, and I would no longer support your business. I tried to support black-owned businesses, but you guys continue to rip me off." Ms. McCrae responded by saying that since a dozen means 12, the quantity of masks she sent was the correct, and she would not be able to offer a refund. She even apologized for disappointing the customer and offered a $5 discount coupon. To this, the customer responded by saying they were not interested and wrote, "I must have missed it on the invoice. I needed 20. I never heard of it being listed as 12. I swear it was pronounced Dub Zen, like a dub 20. Whatever, though." The bizarre exchange has gone viral on Twitter with over 3 likes and hundreds of amused reactions. To clear up the air, Zeta's Vault also posted an invoice with the customer's order, which clearly listed it as 12. Yeah, you can see that it's pretty straightforward. The popularity of the tweet helped Miss McCrae's business take off. I went from 3 online orders every week to 30 in one day. This is beyond amazing, she wrote on Twitter. And then it brings up a conversation. What do you think of this? You know, I could have seen if somebody was maybe naive and thought a dozen sometimes means 13 when you think of a baker's dozen. Or like duo means 2. So maybe they thought Zen meant 10 and it was like dozen, 210, 2 times 10. But if you've been to, I don't know, and I'm not trying to shame anybody, but like the 2nd grade, maybe the 1st grade, you learn what a dozen is. If you've ever watched Sesame Street, if you've existed anywhere, at least in North America, where this order was taking place, and you've been to school, or you've been around television, or you've been around anybody, you can at least count to 12 and know what a dozen is if you've ever bought eggs. So, I mean, it's not to shame anybody, but I would have thought it was a joke, and then I would have probably gotten angry if they got belligerent with me, because I'd be like, you can't be this naive. But she did a good job, and I mean, obviously, she's rewarded for it with plenty of business. Now, hopefully she doesn't get too many trolls that try to just say, you know, make up order numbers and everything. But still, pretty funny exchange. I thought it was kind of neat. You know, fun little story to end our weird news with. I would say there wasn't a whole lot of other interesting weird news, so I'm glad we picked those sort of 3. Just sort of ran the gamut of weird, whacked out to just maybe strange thinking involved with this. And that's going to do it for the weird news this week. Now, before we come into the outro of the show to finish up and tell you what's going on, we have my review of the new Xseed game, Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town on the Nintendo Switch.
Basically using geeks.
Leave me alone, geek boy.
Holy shit, you geeks are badass.
Our friends over at Xseed Games sent a early review copy of Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town for the Nintendo Switch for us to check out for review. This is not my first Story of Seasons game, but it's my first in a while. And I thought, okay, I want to give the farm sim life game, you know, a good shot, because I hadn't been a super big fan since like Harvest Moon on the Super Nintendo, and I played some of the Game Boy ones and some Story of Seasons, but like it hadn't been on my radar because I'm the kind of person that normally isn't a big fan of that style of game. Like I didn't get into Animal Crossing when everybody did last year, and I thought, okay, well, let's give it a go. And it turns out this is my jam. I had a really good time playing this. It has all of the farming life simulator thing you'd want to get out of it. You know, building your farm, making relationship connections with people in town. It has a good localization with some English voice acting involved. You get some DLC costumes when you pre-order it, like a buffalo suit. There's just, if you've played this style of game before, this is sort of the pinnacle of that genre in just how it performs. I was surprised that the frame rate and everything was so good on the Switch, because we're getting to the point now where the Switch is entering its sort of final phases of hardware life cycle, because it's using 7-year-old technology internally, even though we're in technically the 4th year of the system. But they have found ways, Marvelous and Xseed, to just make the game run buttery smooth, both in portable and in docked mode. There are local festivals to take part in the game. There are tons of different ways that you can develop your farmland. And it has a nice soundtrack that is just very gentle and upbeat, and a pretty robust character creator. Now, it is still sort of locked in what a lot of Japanese games are. You have to select a gender, but instead of doing that early on, like right away. It's sort of the last step after you've created your character. First thing you do is you start selecting the different looks of your character from some sliders, as well as stances and attitudes and voices. But they're not gendered in the traditional way of like, here's boy 1, boy 2, girl 1, girl 2, girl haircut, boy haircut. Every haircut and every design for the character's facial features, their body type, their stances, are all completely non-gendered and very neutral in that it's like, you select the energetic style, the bold style, this style. They're more descriptors of what, like a neutral personality type or neutral look, which is pretty cool. They're basically one step away from being completely neutral and making your character any way you want. And that might come with the next game. But I did notice, I'm not somebody who normally pays too much attention to that in the character creator, because I will just pick randomly. Sometimes I'll go with the default of what a game gives me, or I will just go in, flip a coin, and start pressing dials left and right, male, female, anything in between. Doesn't bother me. I just pick anything. But I did notice that there was no descriptor that traditionally conformed to boy or girl, except for the explicit choice you had to make later on. So that's probably indicative of how, gender blind the localization team was at Xseed, which is pretty great. And for anybody that is a big issue for you, this is a great step in the right direction. We're almost at the point where you can just make it completely bland and neutral, whatever you want, customized to your heart's content. And it's not the most robust. Like, you're not dealing with like 255 points of sliders in your character creator. There is a set amount, but they work pretty well. And the graphics in this are smoothed out well. There's anti-aliasing. It seems to work well. There's no stuttering or frame rate issues that you sometimes see from farming simulators on the Switch. It's just a well put together, well localized game. It's retailing at, I believe, anywhere from the $49 to $59 US price point. There's going to be a standalone expansion pass priced at $20. That is discounted by 15% for 3 weeks following the release of the game. It's probably going to be worth it to pick up both, because that brings it, to what a standard retail game would be now. Plus, you get all the DLC in the future, and I can see this game having legs and being sort of the Animal Crossing of this year.
Those magnificent bastards!
Color me kooky, but something very odd is going on around here.
You're not allowed to talk anymore.
And that is going to do it for the show this week. What do we have coming up? Well, or what have I been doing more importantly? Well, I have been editing a lot of podcasts. Aaron and his wife, Darlene, have been super busy recording a few podcasts per week of their favorite and sometimes not so favorite 1950s and 60s science fiction B movies. That is our sort of joint venture, Future Imperfect, Earth versus Soup. Eventually, we're going to spit it out into its own feed. Not in that it's got its own actual feed. You'll still be able to download it, as you always do, from our regular main podcast feed. It just won't be branded necessarily under Future Imperfect, and it'll get its own category on our website. But that's something for the summertime. I have edited, let me think here, episodes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Edited them, had the shows scheduled. We were getting them every other week until June, every other Wednesday. And starting in June, you'll be getting them every single week on Wednesdays. And then probably when we take a break in the summertime, we usually take a few weeks off, or I take a week or two off, and then Birdman takes a week or two off, sometimes not at the same time, so we can, have a little bit of time that way. We'll then switch it up to having probably 2 a week during that time period, in case we need a little slack room for less shows being produced, especially when I'm off. So they're fun. They're anywhere from 35 to about an hour long minutes, and they're fun, informative, and I've had a blast listening to them when I've been editing them. So I've got that on the go. We just released a new Loose Cannon. We might have another one on the go next week. I was going to do a Turd or Treasure episode, but I'm thinking I might have to save some of them for reviews for next week's show, because I believe, I'm 90% positive that Birdman is still going to be out of commission in the hospital, at least till then, maybe even a week longer. We're not 100% sure. It's sort of up in the air until we find out what's up with him, surgery-wise and recovery time-wise. Plus, I will be staying at my grandmother's to help her out. She should be getting her first COVID needle soon, and I'm going to be staying with her for that weekend, so I'm going to probably pre-record the show and release it so that I can focus on helping family during that time. And I will be recording in a day or two for this month's, I said it earlier in the show, this month's Sunday Funnies with JT. Depending on editing time, it's possible that episode comes out before this, if I edit it and release it the same day. If not, you'll receive it on the last Sunday of the month, which is next week. And that's it for now as far as collaborations. We probably will do another loose cannon with Aaron. Not 100% sure when, but maybe next week or the week after. But there is still plenty of content coming. I don't think it's going to be Nerd to the Third unless Birdman is back. If there is, I'll keep an eye out if Billy makes one. And I'll make sure that or Dr. Gonzo makes one, I'll make sure that I syndicate that. We just were sent an email from the Geekcast Radio Network, and they are starting to put together their top 100. The next one, first one of 2021, which is going to be, I think, top 100 Transformers. I don't know if Birdman or I will be able to participate schedule-wise and health and everything-wise in the actual recordings, because it's probably going to be spread across 4 or 5 recordings, I think is how they usually do it. But we will be filling out our surveys and filling out our forms and carefully, at least on my end, thinking about the different choices we have for our top 100. So there will be at least one person from This Week in Geek submitting our picks for the list. That will be calculated and tabulated, and we will be sure to syndicate that with you, because those are always some of the most fun episodes that the Geekcast Radio Network has done, and we've collaborated with on for many years. I think the last one we did was the wrestler one, and that was sort of before everything hit the fan with COVID. So that should be coming up, I guess, in the next few months. That'll be fun. And that's pretty much it right now. I'm going to go edit all this stuff and get back to reviewing some items. And I'll be in touch later this week. And keep in touch with Birdman on Twitter and on Facebook. He is settled in, so he's just waiting on what's going on at the hospital, scans and records and everything wise. But he is reading everything. He's just very sleepy because he's been moving around a lot, and they're waiting to get all his surgery stuff done. So drop him a line, say hi, give him some encouragement, and we'll be sure to have him back on. And maybe we'll do a special episode where he can just explain everything that's been going on, or we'll dedicate a news segment to him so he can sort of fill everybody in once he's back, because it's been a while since he's had to move around to the hospital back and forth like this, and it seems very eventful, everything that's been going on. So our well wishes are with you, and as he likes to use that quote from I think it's from Moe from The Simpsons, I'm more of a well-wisher in that I wish you no particular harm. And that's going to do it for today. Talk to you later.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.